President Trump unveiled another facet of his economic plan, announcing a 200% tariff on John Deere imports should the company proceed with its planned shift of production to Mexico. The agricultural sector unravelled in real time, not tomorrow, not hypothetically, but today. Contracts vanished, programs dissolved, and vast John Deere machinery stood idle, silent markers of a system imploding from within. This isn't solely about farming, it's about the backbone that sustains America's food supply crumbling instantly. One decision, 60 seconds, no forewarning. By the time farmers grasped the situation, their entire economic model had been erased. No natural disaster, no classic downturn, just a chilling bureaucratic void sending tremors from rural Midwest trading desks to Wall Street. This impacts everything: agricultural policy, economic viability, and the future of how America feeds itself. Who halted the system? Why was no alert raised? Project 2025, fine print devastated rural America. A policy blueprint, drafted long before its effects surfaced, outlined aggressive reductions to rural development, agricultural subsidies, and food security programs. While candidates on the campaign trail vowed prosperity, farmers never suspected their support would consign their downfall. The plan proposed phasing out long-standing USDA initiatives, transforming community grants into competitive private sector bids, and dismantling cooperative extension services under the pretext of inefficiency. Most voters missed these specifics, hearing only pledges of revitalised heartland industries, protective tariffs, and economic autonomy. Post-election, the reality emerged. Farmers discovered crop insurance, subsidies, farm-to-school contracts, and rural housing credits were slashed. When cuts hit, they hit swiftly entire communities that once thrived with farmers' markets, and Copes now faced empty stalls and shuttered storefronts. The silence was deafening. No press briefings, no alerts, just form letters and cancelled funds. Those who claimed to champion farmers were, in practice, dismantling their lifelines piece by piece. Some farmers dubbed it the silent harvest not of crops, but of livelihoods. The betrayal stunned deeply, and for many, it was unforgivable. As safety nets vanished, the numbers turned brutal with ruthless precision. Modern agriculture has always been a data-driven game, but the rules shifted abruptly. Corn prices plummeted 37%. Soybeans fell 24%. Wheat dropped 35%. These weren't minor dips, they were systemic fractures. In Ohio, farmers saw decades of work erased by a single harvest too cheap to sell. In Kansas, tractors stood dormant as fuel costs soared while crop values sank. In the Dakotas, banks tightened credit as delinquency spiked. John Deere, a long-time indicator of farming's health, come over 4,000 jobs since 2015, reflecting a collapse in demand for new equipment. Farmers weren't upgrading. They were scavenging parts to repair aging combines, driving tractors their parents used, because new models cost more than their yearly income, and financing had dried up. Worse, farm loan interest rates surged, turning lenders from partners into risk-averse gatekeepers. Without cash flow, farmers couldn't plant. Without crops, they couldn't repay loans. Without loans, they couldn't survive, adapt, or consolidate. That was the new equation. Yet even the most resilient couldn't anticipate the blow from the leader they once supported. Tariffs meant to protect jobs ended up threatening the people holding them. After John Deere announced its Mexico expansion, President Trump issued a bold ultimatum, a 200% tariff on Mexican-built equipment. It sounded like a stand against outsourcing, but it was a direct hit on farmers reliant on those machines. Dealers warned of delayed inventories, parts shortages, and skyrocketing costs. Farmers, already unable to afford new tractors, now face prices 2 to 3 times higher. A machine once priced at $100,000 climbed toward $300,000. The tariffs didn't stop at tractors, they threatened tools, inputs, and replacement parts crossing borders. What was pitched as economic defense became rural strangulation. The fight wasn't about global trade, anymore it was about survival. As pressure mounted, something stirred in the heartland. Farmers weren't just frustrated, they were ready to halt everything. DriveFed Dani spent weeks dissecting dense legislation, decoding hidden amendments, and tracing how rural aid was gutted under the guise of efficiency. You now have the full story. Why farmers were blindsided while headlines stayed mute. If this saved you hours of sifting through government documents, please subscribe to DriveFed Dani. Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers to keep delivering these critical insights. When John Deere chose Monterey over Montana, it didn't just reshape an industry, it shattered a bond built over generations. The company's $55 million investment in a new manufacturing facility in Monterey, Mexico, was framed as strategic modernization. To farmers who trusted the brand for decades, it felt like abandonment. Deere wasn't just relocating, assembly lines it was shifting allegiance. The new plant would produce mid-frame skid steer and compact track loaders, vital for small to mid-sized farms that fuel America's food system. While executives touted supply chain optimization, rural dealers faced layoffs, part shortages, and a future that excluded them. Mexico offered lower labor costs, a growing pool of skilled workers, and proximity to Latin American markets. From the boardroom, the math added up. From Main Street, it looked like betrayal. It wasn't just about where machines were, built it was about who Deere chose to serve. Families who trusted the brand now faced a reality with...
This audio was created with Podcastle.ai.
Families who trusted the brand now faced a reality where their tractors were made by strangers in unfamiliar towns for markets that weren't theirs. The timing couldn't have been worse, with rural American plants already bracing for cutbacks. Deere's future had moved south, sparking political fire. At an Iowa rally, President Trump declared that if John Deere built machines elsewhere, they'd face a 200% tariff to bring them back. The crowd cheered, headlines blazed, but on the ground, reactions were complex. A tariff that steep wasn't just corporate punishment, it was a blow to farmers grappling with inflation, high interest rates, and collapsing crop prices. Machines they could barely afford became unattainable. Repair shops, part suppliers, and rural dealers braced for fallout. Congressional allies proposed restricting federal purchases of foreign-made agricultural equipment, but critics feared the consequences. Tariffs wouldn't just hit corporations, they'd hit the people they aimed to protect. For farmers, it wasn't about ideology, it was about math. Machinery costs were rising, payments were due, and equipment was now tangled in a geopolitical game they didn't choose. While political pressure grew, John Deere stayed silent as a deeper gamble unfolded bet on the future of rural America. For decades, John Deere was more than a brand, it was a symbol of trust, a generational handshake. When green machines rolled into town, they brought jobs, stability, and pride. Now, Deere was betting on global expansion, automation, and efficiency. The company reported a 35% revenue drop, falling short of Wall Street's expectations. Farmers delayed purchases, opting for used equipment or rentals. Precision sales slumped, and large-scale machinery demand plummeted. Deere responded with layoffs, cost cuts, and a shift in vision. Executives forecasted up to $5 billion in net income by 2025, with over half of agricultural and turf exports flowing to Canada, Brazil, Europe, and Australia. Rural America was no longer Deere's core focus. Rural economies felt the sting first. Tool shops, logistics hubs, and community banks tightened operations. When Deere moved out, small businesses struggled to survive. It wasn't just about tractors, it was about whether the heartland still mattered. As that question echoed, the answer came in silence, from machines that no longer needed workers. While headlines focused on tariffs and relocation, John Deere quietly invested in automation autonomous tractors, precision sprayers, AI-driven diagnostics. They weren't just moving jobs overseas, they were eliminating them. Their flagship innovation, an 8-hour autonomous tractor, used GPS, LiDAR, and AI to plant, spray, and harvest without a driver. In theory, it was revolutionary. In practice, it was crushing. Large-scale operations could afford the tech, but most family farms couldn't touch the $1 million price tag. Automation erased roles: drivers, mechanics, field workers. Generational knowledge was replaced by software updates and algorithms. In Brazil, Deere bundled satellite internet for remote equipment oversight. In the US, farmers watched their connection to the land mediated by screens and servers. No protest could stop the march of technology. No tariff could halt innovation. The machines didn't care where they were. Built, they demanded data. rural America began losing its voice, marking a social fracture where farming no longer needed farmers. As autonomous equipment and precision agriculture displaced generations of expertise, the image of a farmer in a field gave way to dashboards and satellite-linked control centres. Technology wasn't creeping, it was dominating. Autonomous tractors and robotic harvesters operated tirelessly, error-free. What took 10 workers a week now took one machine 48 hours. For large operations with capital, it was transformative. For family farms, it was fatal. The cost of these systems, often over $1 million, was unimaginable for most. The gap between early adopters and traditional farmers widened seasonally. Progress became unease. There's no guide for running a farm without farmers. As jobs vanished, so did the culture, connection, and soul of farming. It's not just efficiency, it's what's lost when tradition is overwritten by automation. If this resonates, please subscribe to DriveFed Dani. We're pushing for 1,000 subscribers to keep uncovering these stories. Your support fuels our work. A labour crisis, worsened by policy, tightened its grip. Policies curbing illegal migration destabilised the workforce sustaining agriculture. Over 70% of US farm workers were immigrants, many undocumented, performing grueling tasks picking strawberries, herding cattle, sorting produce. When deportations intensified, those workers vanished, and so did their labour. California farmers let crops rot. Arizona dairies downsized. Florida growers abandoned harvests. Higher wages couldn't attract domestic workers. The labour pool didn't exist. This wasn't political, it was about viability. No workers meant no food, and no food meant soaring grocery prices. Policies sold as protective dismantled the supply chain they claimed to defend. The labour crisis was visible, immediate, and unsolvable by rhetoric. Family farms weren't just fading, they were fracturing. Across the Midwest, century-old farms went dark. Government support waned, labour shortages persisted, margins shrank, and technology posed hurdles. Sons and daughters walked away. The debt was too high, the future too uncertain. For ageing farmers, there was no one to pass the torch to. Land values dropped, equipment aged, banks retreated. Farmland was sold to developers or absorbed by corporate farms. Community halls closed, feed stores shuttered, schools emptied. Towns built around agriculture became ghost maps. Farming was ritual, identity, a story written in soil. That story was now rewritten in spreadsheets and foreclosures. The rural exodus wasn't just generational, it was cultural, erasing knowledge and self-reliance. Today's tractors don't just work, they collect data, decide, and report to manufacturers, pulling farmers into a system of dependency. Machines require specialised software to operate or repair. Simple fixes once done with a wrench now demand technicians, and licensing agreements. John Deere and others lock their ecosystems. Farmers can't legally repair equipment without risking warranties or lawsuits. This isn't inconvenience, it's existential. A farmer without tool control is a worker, not an owner. The right to repair movement pushes back, demanding autonomy, but progress is slow. As technology accelerates, the self-reliant farmer becomes obsolete, renting their livelihood from tech they don't control. As family farms closed, investment firms and agribusinesses bought up rural America. Farmland became portfolio assets alongside stocks. Buyers weren't interested in communities or stewardship, just yield. Corporate entities outbid locals, absorbed downturns, and secured exclusive contracts. They controlled seed, processing, distribution, and retail. Farmers became employees, fields became assets, food became products. Greenwashing campaigns masked extractive models. For consumers, it meant fewer choices for communities, fewer routes for democracy, fewer hands controlling food. Yet, some farmers rewrote the playbook. Small farms sold directly to consumers via community-supported agriculture, grew heirloom crops, and hosted farm-totable events. They bypassed middlemen, retaining profits. Customers weren't just buyers, they were believers, paying for transparency and locality. These farms created markets immune to commodity swings. Some embraced agritourism, offering lodging and workshops. Others partnered with schools and food banks, becoming community anchors. Technology supported autonomy apps for deliveries, blockchain for organic claims. Their advantage was narrative, authenticity. These weren't relics, they were prototypes. But this model isn't scalable for all. Corporate farms benefit from policies favouring scale. Subsidies and tax breaks reward volume, not resilience. Small farms fend for themselves. This isn't competition, it's systemic. Lobbyists shape legislation, disadvantaging smaller operations. Farmland prices soar, requiring investor backing or inheritance. The question isn't efficiency, it's what we're willing to preserve. The war for our food system is measurable. Consolidation, automation, and farm losses grow yearly. Solutions exist: right to repair laws, fair pricing, immigration reform, subsidy realignment. These require ballots, coalitions, and pressure. Consumers hold power. Every dollar votes for consolidation or community. Supporting local producers, demanding transparent supply chains, and opposing monopolies can shift the needle. Infrastructure, investment, regional food hubs, cooperative storage, affordable land access, and ecological training is critical. Public education on food origins fosters awareness. This is about sovereignty, whether farmers remain independent or become corporate employees. For rural communities, it's about relevance in a digitising world. For urban dwellers, it's about understanding who pays for their meals. Can we ignore the stress-breaking farmers, the hollowed-out communities, the systems tightening their grip? What happens when the last family farm sells? When machines don't need us? When land forgets our names? If this story hit home, share your thoughts below. What's happening in your town? We read every comment because this story continues with you. Subscribe to DriveFed Dani to stay informed and help us hit 1,000 subscribers. Your support keeps this work alive. Thank you for watching.